Good morning. Was there a decaf coffee outside? How is everybody doing? Okay, we'll get to this. Good morning. I just want to start by saying what an honor to be back. It's been 4 years, and so much has happened since the first time I got in front of you. And I would like to walk you through it, but I think the first time when I was speaking, I wasn't really talking a lot about my personal story. We were mainly just talking about the issue. So today, in the next 30 minutes, I would like to walk you through a little bit about my journey, how I got here, what was being a human trafficked victim like for me, and how I got to the place where I am today, where I work with the financial institutions. So it's gonna go very quick. Just a couple of heads up. One, I have an accent. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, it's completely fine. Just put your hands up, and we'll turn on the subtitles. The other thing is, when I get nervous, or if I lost my thoughts, it happens, I speak Hungarian or Hunglish. So just please let me know to press the button and come back. But usually I come back to English. I think eventually we're going to launch a website with my Hunglish words, like a directory. But so other than that, we're gonna be fine. So my story started a lot long ago, way before 20 years, but I grew up in communist Hungary, and I grew up with a police officer mother. That's me as a baby on the left, and my brother on the other side. That's my only baby picture. That's because apparently I was a very ugly baby. True story. Apparently I had a brick head. And so when my mom took me out for a walk, apparently she had to cover my head so I don't scare the old ladies. And so therefore she decided it's probably best if we only have one picture of me as a baby. So there it is. But anyways, I think I turned out okay. When I say I grew up in a communism, that's kind of what communism was like for us. 2 TV channels, watching the Russian soldiers every Sunday on television, marching, learning Russian instead of English, watching Russian TV shows or very censored television. And if that wasn't bad enough, I grew up with a mother who was a police officer and very, very strict. So there was a lot of other childhood trauma that happened before I even became a trafficked victim. It is all in my book. It's 374 pages. Please don't buy it. It's actually a crazy book, but if you really have to, it's here today. I'm the worst promoter for my book. My publisher will tell you. But so around the age of 20, we got in a major financial distress. And by then, my mother wasn't living with us. And my brother and I were trying to get us out of a financial stress. And I answered an ad. I was almost 20 years old, still lived a very sheltered life. I never left the Eastern Bloc. I've never been into North America. I actually thought it's going to be so cool to come here, where all the big movies were made, because to me, Canada was like America. I didn't know the difference. To me, when I landed at the airport and I saw everybody's walking around with coffee cups like we see in the movie, I thought I dropped right into Hollywood. It was actually very exciting until it wasn't. I didn't really speak the language. Actually, I only spoke 2 words. One is the F word, which is because of all the movies. And the other one was, I think, water, because I learned it on a flight how to say that, and that's it. And so when I landed, the culture shock was immediate. I didn't speak the language. And we gone through the immigration, and immediately there were problems with my paperwork. And it took 6 to 7 hours interrogation for them to let me go. And by this time, I was actually very nervous and scared, and I knew something was really wrong. But my agent was waiting for me outside at the airport. They weren't very pleased with me either. They picked me up. They took me to a nearby motel, which is the Sherwood, by the Sherwood Mall. It's called at the time Motel 27, which is on the picture. And that's when I saw there was about 100 other girls in the motel, all from the Eastern Bloc. They all had drivers and people with them. I was put into a motel room, and that's when I was told that I owe them about $3,500, and I need to pay that off. And if I don't pay right now, they are going to visit my brother in Hungary, and they're going to send the Ukrainian mafia, and we cannot protect them from here. So I need to pay off. And I was very scared. I had no idea what just happened. All I knew that I was told that I owed money. And in my culture growing up, that means you're a thief if you're not paying. So I was terrified. And I just wanted to do whatever they asked, whatever I had to do to get this done. So I still never really understood the depth of what's going to happen until probably 12 minutes later when they took me to a nearby strip joint. And that's when I realized that I am not going to be a babysitter. I am going to work in a strip joint as a stripper. I've never done any work like this in my life. I've never been to a strip joint. As a matter of fact, I grew up very sheltered. I was always a good girl. I never talked back. Well, maybe my mom would disagree, but as far as I remember, I was a good girl. I never talked back. I always complied. I always went to my classes. I was a straight-A student. I was an honored student. I won every award you can think of. I was a community-spirited girl. I ran a whole bunch of volunteer programs. And from there, to come here, end up in a strip joint, and thinking that there's no way out, that's human trafficking. So I stood there, and I remember very clearly when the bar owner took my clothes, literally took all of my clothes and sexually assaulted me. But then he gave me a bunch of clothes, a stripper clothes, and he asked me to go out, pushed me out of the room. That was the moment when I realized that Timea has to go to sleep. And this new person who's going to be a stripper, and God knows what else I have to do, my new name was Allison. Allison had to come alive and become tough and survive. So that was the moment when I said goodbye to Timea, said hello to Allison, and became a complete different person, and started to compile all the lies that I have to tell back home, what I'm doing, and this whole other identity started to take on its own. I had to forget who Timea was. I had to forget what was my favorite movies, my favorite food, how my mom used to call me when I was a little girl, because I can't have both girls existing in me. Otherwise, I won't be able to do what I have to do. So what I call that in a service provider training is that we become a zombie, and we become numb. And we don't want to feel, we don't want to remember, we just need to do. So what happened is they relocated me, obviously, from my country. They isolated me from my loved ones, my family, and my safety net, and they stopped feeding us. We would get food once a day. It was a sandwich and a nasty. So as a result, I went down from 125 pounds to 89 pounds in 2 weeks. I worked in every club in Toronto, from Toronto to North York, actually, all the way to Newmarket, from Mississauga to the other end of Toronto. Drove all around on the highways. These guys made about $40,000 on my back specifically. I ended up working 20 to 21 hours a day, and eventually it wasn't just stripping. Eventually they took us to massage places. Eventually people would come to our motel. So I actually lost counting how many times I had to have interaction with men for money. Then eventually the brainwashing would start, and they would tell us what happens to us if we're going to leave. If we go to the police, that Canadian police will throw us in jail, they will rape us, and then the immigration will take us. We will be deported. And so this is a classic version of being trafficked. This is what you may or may not see in the movies. So that's me before. And before I was trafficked, I actually had dreams. I had a whole life kind of dreamt out ahead of me. I was 9 years old when I set up my first lemonade stand, and every Tuesday I made a killing with it. I was 12 years old when I set up the first production company with my newspaper at the school. I was making a killing with it, and what I mean by that, I could buy ice cream anytime I wanted. That's when I could have sugar at the time. And at 15, I had my first company. As a matter of fact, that's me at my very first company directing a music video for famous Hungarian people. And then look at me after. And that was me at 20, just after escaping. I was 89 pounds. I was traumatized. And my life, as I planned it out for me, was completely taken away. It took me 20 years to rebuild my life, and we'll get there. But if it wasn't for this amazing Toronto police officer, I would not be here today. His name is Mike Josefovic. He was one of the officers who was involved in my rescue. Eventually, they took down the entire ring. But again, by the time we went to court, we couldn't prove anything. It was 1 year before human trafficking was introduced into our criminal law. So when we actually went to court, I was called mentally ill. My imagination is extremely wild, and Mike got a lot of heat for taking so much resources to take this case to court. That man trafficked over 130 Eastern European girls. He was found with 130 passports in his office. But yet I was mentally ill. I should have gone to see a doctor. But 1 year later, and this came from a judge, by the way, and 1 year later, Canada decided that we are going to implement the new laws that came out of the United Nations. It's called human trafficking. So if my court actually would have happened later, or the charges would have been laid later, I would have been a mentally ill, crazy person. I would be a victim of human trafficking. So the other thing that didn't really go well during our court, we never actually looked into financial patterns. Nobody at the time looked at the correlation between the financial blueprints, follow the money, and human trafficking. So 12 years after everything happened, and now the laws are coming out, and there was some awareness, not as much as now, I ended up reaching out to law enforcement when I saw a case on television and say, look, I would like to help you with the victims because I know why they're not coming forward. I think I was a victim of this crime, and let me know how I can help you. So we started communicating. Eventually, they asked me to come in and do a training, and that became a snowball reaction. Then RCMP heard about me, and I ended up being on a tour. This was literally the first time anybody started doing training. So people say, Timea was always at the right time and the right place. I'm like, well, that's great. I would have much rather, have a different future, but okay. But in a way, I was in the right time, in the right place, if we're talking about the advocacy and the awareness. So as a result, I started training law enforcement and service providers across Canada, and I ended up going to the States. But within that, I actually started a safe house here in Toronto. It was Canada's very first safe house for sex trafficked victims. Nobody else knew what to do with the victims, so naturally it was my passion. I started picking up victims, and we started literally grinding for funding. But what happened for the next 6 years, we ended up working with over 300 Canadian victims. The calls, we got more calls for victim services than regular victim services. We got about 1,000 calls a year for human trafficking. That's only because people started to know who we are and what we did. Unfortunately, two things happened. We ran out of funding, so we had to close the safe house. But during that same time, I ended up going to court, like you heard it earlier, and we went to court with this Canadian girl and this Canadian trafficker, and he was one of the worst trafficker I have ever went up against. He burnt her alive. I mean, there's just horrible things. What we call it, the gorilla trafficker. There was no way of proving anything because it was he said, she said. It was one of the hardest cases we worked on. It took us 2 years to get her to come forward, and we made her believe in the system, and we made her believe that society will see this, and she will be viewed as a victim, and she will be taken care of in a way and get the resources. At the end of the court, the judge said, Mr. White, we're really sorry for any inconvenience we caused you. There's no more charges against you. You're free to go. Ms. Brown, next time, please choose your boyfriends wisely. I was crushed. I was literally on the ground for 2 weeks. I couldn't get up. I couldn't look her in the eye. She disappeared. We couldn't find her, which is good because if we can't find her, hopefully he can't find her either. And he would have absolutely killed her. Here in Canada, in Toronto, this is all happening around us. So during that time, I got an email. I will get back to the happy ending later. I'm not in a happy ending mood yet. During that time, I got an email from a company, and I'm going to name them now. Usually I don't name them, but I'm naming them because they are actually a sponsor today. I got an email from Verafin, and at the time I only worked with police officers, but Verafin sent an email and said, I would like you to come and teach us about human trafficking. I'm like, I don't know what Verafin is. I only work with cops. I don't really have time for this, and right now I'm licking my wounds, so delete. I got another email a week later. If you know this lady, Tanya, she's very persistent. So she's like, we really would like you to come. We are out of Newfoundland. We are a software company. We work with banks. Like, you know what, I could use a little vacation. Never been to Newfoundland before. I'm going to go and talk to this group. I don't even know what they do. I was just really hurt, and I really didn't care about anything else, but I'm like, fine. So I went to Newfoundland. And if you guys ever been there, you know it's like an island, and it's very windy, and I always tell this story. It's like Hotel California. You can go, but you never know when you're going to leave because the winds are so strong that you don't know if you can take off. So anyways, I went into this huge building, and it's like a busy bee. Everybody's running around. Everybody looks very important and doing very important jobs, and everybody looks really happy. And they are fighting financial crime. I'm like, how can you be so happy when you're working with financial crime? I didn't get that because I'm only used to law enforcement and service providers, and let me tell you, they are not happy. So we start working, and the man on the right, the gentleman with less hair, his name is Charles. He's actually here today. He's one of the engineers, and he goes, well, they listened to my presentation, and then he goes, can I show you what we are working on? I still had no clue what's going on. So he pulls me in, and this was one of our mastermind moments when he pulls up a software that they're working on where he said, we have a case, we flagged it as human trafficking, but can you please explain to me why it came up as human trafficking? We put in all the indicators, all the flags, it's just analytics. It came up, but I don't understand why this is human trafficking. So we sit there with Charles and his team. Hi, Charles. Hi, thanks for being here. I know you didn't come to see me, but I'm just going to pretend you did. So we look through the transactions, and I look at Charles, and I'm like, oh, yeah, she's a victim because of the and I was like, and that was the moment when I had a huge light bulb moment. And it was literally like a golden light, like, oh. And I look at Charles, and I see him like an angel, literally. And I was like, wow, wait a minute. Okay, hold on 1 second. So you guys can flag these transactions through banks, and you can literally let the bank know when you have either a victim or a trafficker. And he goes, and when you meet him, he's very humble. He's like, well, yeah. I'm like, well, yeah. Well, yeah. I could have used that 2 weeks ago in court, because I tell you this, if we had Verafin, and if they didn't, if the investigators, if we even knew about this stuff, that girl would have deemed as a victim, and he would have gone to jail for the rest of his life. And that was my light bulb moment. And I want you to hear and feel what I'm feeling, how exciting I was, and how I ended up really making my mission to start working with financial institutions. So at that moment, we started working with Verafin, and well, eventually I started harassing them actually to take me on a tour. So we went around in the United States educating and using the same program. And a couple of times what I realized is the bankers would come up to us and say, well, I see those flags, I see those things. We would talk about specifically one case in a seminar, and they would come up to me and they're like, oh, I know those hotels, like I see them on the transactions. And we're like, well, then flag them, because that's where human trafficking victims are. So I actually started seeing the immediate difference that you can make. And that's when I learned by listening to a lot of conferences through Verafin, and I learned by being invited to other conferences how much financial institutions can actually play a part in ending or creating a living crap out of human traffickers. Because I realized that, you know what, human trafficking is only happening for one reason, because of greed. Human traffickers just want one thing, money. And through that 3 years touring in the States with the bankers, I realized you guys actually have more power over law enforcement than anybody else. So you became my new best friends. Hi, Jennifer. Nice to see you. Sorry. And I did literally make my mission to call out for you guys. And so in 2015, I was so honored to be invited to be on a panel with Lepo Jankovic, who's an RCMP officer who took down the largest human trafficking case in Canada. And we were invited to the ACAMS conference in 2015. Exactly what you just said happened. And I was still very hurt over that court case, very frustrated. So at the end of my speech, I said, if you hear me, and if you understand my mission, and if you understand how fortunate you are in a position that you are in, and the fact that you can actually save lives, can you please come forward and help me? Help me on my mission. So Peter Warwick, who I didn't know at the time who he was, he got up and he's like, my boss doesn't know this yet, but we are signing up. And I didn't know what that meant. Honestly, in my head, I'm like, here's another person in a suit just going to make another promise. Great, we'll see what happens. 2 weeks later, this man calls me and says, can you come to a meeting in Toronto? I said, sure, I'll go to a meeting in Toronto. We'll have another coffee and donuts, and then nothing is ever going to come out of it, which is usually how it works. I come to this meeting, every single bank was in that room. And the federal people, very important people, and the police, and the FinTrax, whichever is in Canada. I should know this by now, really. FinTrack? I knew that. They were in the room, too. I know they're very, very important people. And I think Verafin, did you came? No, you didn't. No, you did. You did. Anyways, it was a very good crowd. And they started Project Protect. And I was stunned. I couldn't believe it. So then Project Protect starts. And because of Project Protect, now I realized who Peter Warwick is. So I bought him lunch. He didn't let me pay for it, though. But I tried. Anyway, so I thanked him very much. I told him, that I didn't really believe that it's going to happen, but it did. So then, because of Project Protect, the world actually realized that this is the very first project where a task force happens between banks and law enforcement. And so everybody wanted to know what Project Protect was. So we got a call from The Economist. Just so you know, because I'm from the communism and I don't pay attention to anything, I actually don't know anything. I don't know The Economist. I don't know stars. Very big stars can sit next to me. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't know who they are. Like, I am completely clueless. So apparently The Economist want us on a documentary. I don't know what it is, but I'll do it because Peter want me to. But then I get a call from this lady, and she says, don't laugh, I'm from Forbes, or like it was an email actually, and she's from Forbes in my mind, and she wants to interview me about the work that I do with financial institutions. So I tell my husband, He's like, how's your day? I'm like, I don't know, I think some church magazine wants to interview me. Not there's anything wrong with church magazines. He goes, what's the name? I said, I think it's Forbes. My husband is American. He goes, what? Can you spell it? I said, Forbes. He goes, no, you calling them. You are doing that interview. It's not Forbes, honey, it's Forbes. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll do Forbes, sure. So I did Forbes, and as a result, I got a call from United Nations. And United Nations asked me if I can join a task force, a global task force on a financial, we all come together and we're going to save the world kind of task force. And they want me to be on it from Canada. I literally dropped the phone. And I picked it up and I said, okay, I think there's a mistake. I barely write English, as you all know. Anybody follows me on LinkedIn? Yeah? You see my posts? Yes, that's all me. I had to self-taught English, and it's really not an excuse, but I just can't write English very well. But anyway, so they asked me to go on this task force. And in my heart, I really, really wanted to do it. I thought I can do it. But in my mind is like, what do I really know? You guys should be on it. So I called Peter. I said, Peter, I think they actually want you. Like, really, don't put me on it. He goes, no, you're doing this. You're getting on that task force. Because I think what they want is the voice of a survivor. So for the first couple of meetings, it wasn't intimidating at all, really. Like United Nations and like really important people from really important companies. Like the lady is a CEO of some company that owns like $3 trillion of the, really nothing intimidating at all. I had no idea what I was doing there for the first couple of times. And then when we started to get to the nuts and bolts and we started talking about the project, so the project was really, the goal was to create a blueprint to unlock the potentials for financial institutions around the world on how to identify risk management, responsible investments, and a whole bunch of really big words that I can't even believe I just pronounced right. But as we were going through these meetings, I learned so much, and I even realized more how important it is for you guys to be a part of this. So we worked for a whole year. That's me sitting there all by myself, scared and stuff, but anyways, okay. With very important people. I still don't know how it happened. But this is what it looks like if you go on a website. It's all free. It's a tool. I actually have a copy with me, so if you really have to buy my book, but I have like this copy. This is actually more exciting to me. Don't tell my publisher I said that. But to kind of wrap it all, the whole thing, why I believe that financial institutions have not just a major part, but singly the most important part of playing to end human trafficking is because you guys have the control over the money. The money that is made on our lives, on our backs, blood, sweat, and tear, every single dollar comes back to your institutions. Because human trafficking, sex trafficking, forced labor, all type of human trafficking now is all happening online and through the institutions. The money has to come back. Advertisement happening online. In sex trafficking, you have to rent cars, you have to rent hotels. You can't do anything without a credit card or without being online and making payments online. Human trafficking is 150% connected to the financial institution. So if I can give you just one vision or image, it is not just human trafficking, it is money laundering. It's coming from proceeds of crime, which you already all know. But that is the truth of it. And every single dollar that comes into your institutions from human trafficking, and then you charge fees on it, and you have clients, and so your company also makes money on our back. And the beautiful thing about you as an individual, that it's not that you don't want to help, specifically financial institutions, it's that you just don't know. And that's what I learned. That was the biggest thing that I actually was able to learn through the tour in the United States. When we got in front of 200 to 300 financial institution members, people like yourself, coming to these conferences, and we were just teaching them, the world changed because everybody wanted to help. Everybody wanted to come on board. And you guys, seriously, since the financial institution came on board and the sector 6 years ago, we see a massive change. We couldn't have not done all of this without you. So I call you guys the undercover superheroes. And I personally just want to thank you so very much for everything that you are about to do for this cause. And I also just wanted to say, like, you may think you're just going into an office, click, 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 comply, comply. But those clicks, when you send it off to FinTrack, I knew it. When you send it off to FinTrack, you could literally save somebody's life. So did you ever thought, when you went into this industry, that with the clickings and teachings and webinars and seminars, you end up going to save lives? No pressure, but that's the truth. So this is why it is my passion to teach specifically financial institutions, and I'm going to do it as long as I can or as long as you want to hear it. And I do want to give you a little bit of a happy ending. I'm not going to go back on slides, or maybe, don't look, okay? Don't look. It's going to hurt. Sorry for biz, but So the happy ending of this story is, there it is. So now I restarted a company. This is not advertising. I just want to tell you the happy ending, what we can do when we just put our minds to it. So I started a company. It's a social enterprise, Timea's cause. Every profit we make goes back to employ survivors of human trafficking here in Canada and in the United States. And it was actually such a huge success that last year we actually ended up becoming a preferred supplier by Conference Direct, which is the largest event company in the world. And we actually launched our CSR packages, which is corporate social responsible activities, which means we come out to conferences and companies, we teach about human trafficking, and then we ask you to help us to assemble packages for survivors of human trafficking, spa packages that we hand them out before they go to court or when they go into a safe house. So it's actually a great activity. It's an hour or two. It employs our survivors. You give back and you learn, and we are super proud of it. It's been one of the most successful initiatives that we launched. And our company so far helped and employed 9 people, which is amazing. 2 of them actually were able to completely transition out of shelters and housing crisis. And with that, they also started becoming speakers and trainers, and they are also going on their healing journey. So that's our happy ending. This is where we're at, and we are going to continue this fight with your help. And again, I just really appreciate you are coming together, continuing to do this work. I will be here today, and I will be here tomorrow again with my Verifin friends. And tomorrow we're going to go into a lot of detailed discussions on how you can find, human trafficking in your institutions. Like I said, I do have 1 copy of the book that we created out of United Nations. It's free, and you can also go online and download it. No matter what institution you're from, whether you're in compliance or AML or whatever you are, you're gonna find an entire section for yourself. And yes, my books are here. Again, it's 340 pages. It's very long. Don't worry about it. But if you really have to, I would love to give you a copy when you come. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you so much for coming today. And thank you so much for making it early in here to listen to my yakking. So it was so nice to meet you. And I just want to say a personal thanks to ACAMS for everything that you guys accomplished in the last 4 years. I want to tell you that when I came yesterday and I saw that big sign about human trafficking and the numbers and how much work we have done together as a community, honestly, I should be giving you an award. So maybe I should. Maybe I will. But thank you so much, and thank you guys so much for listening.
A couple of questions. Yeah, a couple of questions. Remember, we talked about questions. We do not have a lot of time for questions. That's all. No, it's, to me, it's such an amazing story, and we're so thankful that you're here. Again, we're really thankful that you're here and thankful that we've had this connection with you. They're also bringing on to set up the next panel. So just ignore, everyone just look at us. So, what you described, the marshaling of the financial community and the kind of information sharing, that's really happening all over. And the components that you've mentioned, Project Protect, really great strides in terms of, this thing that you mentioned about being able to bring a prosecution using financial information rather than just relying on terrorized, traumatized victims. But tell me a little bit, I know you have some concerns that after Canada has done the human trafficking bill, seem to be moving forward, that there's a little bit of a backsliding on some of this in terms of the prosecutions and the success of prosecutions, and maybe that's a lesson for people here.
Yeah, so a lot of great work has been done by both the provincial and the federal government. We have put in some pretty strong laws. We have significant laws. Our concern is right now is that you still get more sentencing time for a financial crime in Canada than when you traffic a human being. And to me, that's very concerning. We have put in several very strong human trafficking laws. One of them was Bill C, not 36, 268, which was if you traffic a human being under the age of 18, you will get mandatory minimum of 10 years. Judges across the province in Canada, due to our liberal mindset, they fear that it's too harsh. And they actually reducing the sentences over and over and over again. And so my question is, why do we have laws if we don't implement that? And that basically just creates, it's like a catch and release. And it just, again, creates a whole bunch of financial crisis for the economy that we don't really need.
Well, Timea, we are out of time. And thank you for taking the one question. And as Timea said, she'll be around and can take more questions. What a pleasure. Thank you.